beer.
Yeah. Here you go, coffee and beer.
The beer and the water quality. Do it in the afternoon.
That was the original reason to brew beer, wasn't it? To make the water drinkable?
Yeah.
Good morning, Chihuahua.
Morning, Greg.
Morning, Mike.
Did Wayne get out plowing already, or is he waiting?
They went out yesterday about, I don't know. Well, the sun was still up. They've been out all night.
Okay.
They've been running through the night.
Mm-hmm.
I think he swung through here about an hour ago and reloaded with fuel and took off again.
Uh-huh.
He said they get done once and they got to turn right back around and do it again.
Yeah. I'm still getting a little light snow here, not too much, but no wind right now. So
Yeah, it's pretty calm here too.
yeah. Hey, Sarah, have you heard of the Nature Conservancy's advocate for agriculture or farmer to farmer mentor program they're working on?
I've heard a little bit about it, but not a terrible amount.
Okay, I'm part of the first cohort. They're calling it the first class.
Okay.
So we have a couple more classes yet. So they're teaching me how to talk on soil health.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah, and then they want to do 2 more classes at least. So if you know anybody that could join this, they're looking for more recruits.
Okay.
So far, I think I'm the only one in Indiana. The rest of them in this class was Ohio.
Okay. Why don't you, do you have my email? You can send me that.
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
I can do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know you don't have too much in the Western Lake Erie Basin, but I don't know if they will they might allow expansion. That's their goal, is to make this a usable program that anybody can do. So
Okay.
time they get through it, they want to have a really good working program. So
Okay.
and be able to share it. Well, what do you think, Andrea? Should we go?
I think so, Mike. I'm sure last time I remember several people adding after we started, so I think we should just go with it. And
All right,
Oh,
so
yeah.
we're going for recording this morning.
Yep. I do think the snow is probably working against us, unfortunately, but we had no way of planning for that.
Yep. All right, well, I'd like to say good morning to everyone. Welcome to the Allen County Soil and Water Conservation District's Coffee and Erosion program on this nice snowy day. I'm Mike Whirling. I'm an employee at the SWCD, and I'm a conservation farmer in Decatur, Indiana, or near Decatur, Indiana. I farm on the St. Mary's River, so I have employed a lot of the practices that we'll probably be talking about. Please keep your audio on mute unless you're speaking, and use the chat function. We'll be monitoring that for any questions or comments. Soil is the living, breathing part of farming that what we grow in, that makes us possible to grow and live. Dirt is when that soil is in the house and I have to clean it up or sweep it out of the house. So soil and dirt are two. I always say my soil is not dirt. So today we have Sarah Day from the NRCS as a district conservationist from Wells County, Indiana. She's going to bring us her wealth of knowledge and experience. on our local issues and how we treat that. And then we have Chi-Hua Huang from the USDA ARS National Soil Erosion Research Lab from West Lafayette, Indiana. And he's going to bring us the big picture of what we can do. So let's just start right in with Sarah and share with us what you got.
Thank you, Mike. So let's see if we can get this up. Can everybody see it?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, so as Mike said, I'm Sarah Day. I'm the district conservationist in Wells County, Indiana. I do have to apologize this morning. As you all know, we got a lot of snow and my daycare is closed, so I have my kids today. Hopefully they will be staying in the other room perfectly content watching TV, but we'll see. So the topic this morning, soil health and soil erosion. I will tell you a little bit about my background. I work for NRCS in Bluffton, Indiana, district conservationist, but I went to Purdue University and got a bachelor's in agronomy, and then I did my master's on cover crops and soil health. So got a lot of great experience there. And we will go ahead and jump right in. Except for the slides aren't changing now. Let me.
Sarah, if nothing else, you could just leave it like that
There we
and
go.
change them that way. They won't.
There we go.
There it goes. Good.
I just had to restart it. Okay, so first of all, we will talk about the different types of soil erosion. In NRCS, we like to call these concentrated erosion and sheet and rill erosion. So concentrated erosion is what you can see with your eyes as you're driving down the road after a rain event or after some snow melt. These cause ephemeral gullies and classic gullies. So I have a picture of an ephemeral gully. These are ones that just kind of look like a water slide in the field. It carries sediment with it, and these are the types of gullies that you can see. Classic gullies are ones that you could put a truck in. So these are ephemeral gullies that have worsened so much that you can literally bury a pickup truck in. These cause horrible issues. They can't be farmed anymore, and they require some sort of excavation to fix. A lot of farmers like to fix ephemeral gullies with disking, and we try to get them to plant some seed in there, but that's ephemeral gullies and classic gullies. And sheet and rill is the type of erosion that you don't really see unless we have a lot of snow, and then we call it snert. You can actually see the dirt in the snow. But the sheet and rill happens with almost every rain event and snow melt. This is erosion of the whole surface of the soil, not just those concentrated areas of ephemeral gullies. And it is the main reason why we lose a lot of topsoil. And then different soil types differ with the amount of erosion that occurs. So the amount of slope that you have in that soil, and then even different soil types, because they all have different percentages of silt, sand, and clay that can be more subject to wind and water erosion. So I'm going to talk about how erosion affects different properties of the soil, and I'll start with physical properties. So the first thing is loss of organic matter. As farmers, we spend all of this time trying to build up organic matter, and then we have erosion that just washes it away and washes the topsoil away, which is not good because organic matter is a huge part of soil function as far as the physical properties, and then it holds a lot of nutrients that, can be washed away if it's not there. And it's a good food source and home source for biologicals in our soils. Aggregate stability is affected greatly. Aggregates are soil particles that are glued or held together. I have a picture of a slake test, and we've all seen a slake test. And when you put the soil in the water, that stuff that flakes off are soil particles that are not held together. And erosion can break up those soil particles and then carry the sediment away. And then when you have a raindrop impact onto bare soil, that also breaks up aggregates and causes the sediment to wash. It affects infiltration, especially as the sediment settles into low areas. It can cause a crust over the top of the soil, and then you don't get the infiltration of the rain that you need. And also an unhealthy soil, as raindrops hit the surface, if they're not absorbed into the soil, they just wash away, carrying sediment and nutrients with it. So that's not good. That also has to do with the water holding capacity of the soil. Organic matter and topsoil holds a lot of moisture, holds a lot of water throughout the whole year. And so when you lose that topsoil and you lose the organic matter, you lose the soil's ability to hold that water, which then causes the soil not to be able to absorb water that is rained on, and then it can't infiltrate, and then it washes sediment away. So soil chemical properties, as I've said before, erosion washes away nutrients, which is not good. That means it's washing away the fertilizer that we put on our soil. It's washing away the nutrients that is held by organic matter and held by roots. This is nutrients that is needed by our cash crops and our microbes in the soil that process our fertilizers. Washes away our organic matter, which is the #1 nutrient that our plants need. And then it also washes away manure, which, all of these are bad because we've all seen this picture here on the right of Lake Erie. These nutrients end up in places that can cause human and environmental harm and causes major issues. So erosion is probably our highest risk of governmental regulation coming down for farmers. We really need to get a handle on erosion washing our nutrients away and causing human harm. As far as soil biological properties, erosion pretty much destroys everything that our microbes need to survive. So it breaks up fungal hyphae, which is hugely important for plant function. It washes away the nutrients that the microbes need to feed on. Organic matter is a huge part of that. It breaks down earthworm channels and other homes for the microbes, and then it blocks the flow of oxygen and water. So most of our microbes need oxygen to survive. And when you get that soil crusting, or you wash away those good soil aggregates and you wash away that topsoil and organic matter, the flow of oxygen stops in that soil. And so they need that to survive. And then soil biological processes actually make up 90% of soil function. So when we don't have a good biological environment, we lose 90% of our soil function. And we need that soil to function to get our cash crops growing. Okay, so we'll move on to practices that increase our erosion risk. This would be wind and water. And the main practice that has a huge impact on erosion is tillage. So tillage breaks up our soil aggregates. We all know that. That's what it was meant for in the first place, actually, is to create a good seed bed, right? To have good seed to soil contact. So it breaks up those soil aggregates that hold soil particles together so that the sediment doesn't wash away and, you know, wash away our nutrients, organic matter, microbial environment. It reduces infiltration when when those soil particles are broken up. It then compacts and you lose your pore space and you lose your spaces for water holding capacity. And when you reduce that, when a raindrop impacts the soil, when it can't infiltrate, it just washes away. So that's not good. So we need a lot of infiltration for these intense rains that we get. It breaks down organic matter and biological glues. When you till a soil, it introduces oxygen into the soil surface for a very short time. It is not a long-term, it's not long-term to have that oxygen come in, but when you have that burst of oxygen, when the soil is first tilled up, it creates a rapid breakdown of organic matter and those biological glues that hold our particles together. And right after that tillage event, right after all that organic matter breaks down, the soil actually compacts. And that's where you get the reduction of infiltration. Tillage also breaks up the roots that hold the soil. A lot of people think this is good because you get that flux of organic matter breakdown, but we really need roots to hold the soil through the winter time. And then it breaks up residues that protect the soil surface. When all of this snow melts, this 11 or so inches of snow melts, it's going to take a lot of residue and a lot of sediment with it, which causes many, many, many issues. And we need those residues intact on top of the soil surface to protect our topsoil and protect our organic matter. The next practice that really, really increases your erosion risk is row cropping and monocropping. And you're saying like, wait, that is kind of, I mean, that's how we do agriculture now. We do row cropping. And yes, I totally understand that. It is a great way to grow cash crops, but it leaves a lot of areas of bare soil in the field. And that, I mean, even in the middle of summer, your corn crop is losing a lot of soil because there's 30 inches of bare soil in between those, in between the plant, in between the rows, I'm sorry. And our corn roots are not very good. I mean, we have bred our genetics to basically fill seed, have a lot of yield, right? So we have kind of bred the rooting out of our corn. So that leaves a lot of risk for erosion during the season. Monocropping is also not super great for biological health because they like to eat a variety of different things. They like to have a variety of roots to interact with. So I always tell people when I'm talking about microbes and biologicals is when you go to a restaurant, would you rather go to the place that just has bagels, or would you rather go to the buffet where you can get steak and potatoes and salad and dessert and, you know, basically a diverse array of choices? You would rather go to the buffet, right? Well, microbes are the same way. They need to have variety. They need to have some diversity. So monocropping is not great for biologicals that create the glues and hold our nutrients into our soil, protect from erosion. And then a lot of times the direction of the rows with sloping ground is not great. If the rows are going with the slope, that leaves a lot of potential for sediment to be carried right down the rows. It's just like a slip and slide. So I want to talk about the weather a little bit. Normally, we used to say that we got most of our precipitation in the winter time, and this year that is probably true since we just got 11 inches of snow. But on a normal year, I threw up this chart. We actually get the most rain events in April, May, and June, or May, June, July. So those are normal years, and those are typically the times where our cash crop plants are small and we leave a lot of bare soil exposed to the elements. And we've been getting more intense rainfalls as the years go by. And these intense rains come in the spring when our soil is left unprotected, when our cash crops are very small. So I've been seeing a lot of erosion during those times, right around planting and after planting. So I think it's going to be increasingly important to protect our soils during those times. We also have some pretty intense temperature extremes now that I don't think we used to have as much. And so when we get all of this snow, it seems like it's extremely cold and then it warms up really quickly, which makes the snow melt a lot faster. It creates more erosion because that water is moving faster and doesn't have time to infiltrate into our soils that are still frozen. So it's going to be increasingly important for us to protect our soils in the springtime during those intense weather patterns. So what are some solutions? The top of the list is going to be no-till. Now I know there's a lot of people, I mean, if you drive across my county here in Wells County, I would still say that 80%, if not more than that, are still doing tillage in the fall and the spring. I think that no-till is really going to be important. If you have an erosion problem and if you are worried about erosion, no-till is your first line of defense on saving your soils and keeping those residues intact on top of the soil. I do have a lot of farmers in my area that like to chop up the corn stalks, which is better for breakdown, right? And that's their goal, is breaking down. And then they get angry in the spring when the corn stalks are plugging up their tile outlets in the ditches. So it's really important to keep that residue intact on top of the soil to protect it. And then I put in some funny bullet points for you, but the next line of defense is going to be cover crops. So growing plants year round. My goal is to figure out a crop rotation or a way to get green plants in the ground year round. So this means using cover crops, using a diverse cropping or companion cropping. This is going to help your biologicals, which again is 90% of soil function, 90% of basically allowing our soils to help us with our cash crops. So again, that's going to be a cover crop. Managing for the intense weather, keeping the soil protected in the early spring, late spring, where we typically have a lot of bare soil, again, cover crops, and then building up our soil biological environment. So how are we going to manage our cover crops for erosion? I always tell people when they come to me and say, I want to plant a cover crop, I always say, okay, what are your goals for your farm? Because cover crops are anecdotal, right? Whatever our problem is, we want to fix it with cover crops. So if your main issue is erosion, you need to have a cover crop that is going to work very well to protect your soil. And it's going to be important to have them established when the rain comes and the snow is melting. And that's going to be that early and late spring. Having good surface protection through the cash crop season is going to be important too, because we have those row crops, a lot of bare soil. I think it's really important to get that ground covered in between those rows. Having diversity for your soil biological and physical properties, having a diverse amount of roots out in the field. So that means cover crop mixes. And then choosing species that will hold and protect soil. So again, if erosion is your main issue, you want cover crops that are going to alleviate that issue. And grasses are really good at that. They have fibrous root systems that hold the soil very well and cover the soil surface very quickly. Cereal rye has always been king cover crop, just like corn is king. Cereal rye is king of the cover crop world. Wheat is also good, annual ryegrass, sorghum, Sudan grass in the summer, and then oats establish really quickly in the fall. They do winter kill though, so I would definitely have something mixed with them like a cereal rye that's going to grow in the spring. So I said that we need to have good cover in the spring. That means also having good cover in the fall, so that cover crops have time to get established before they go dormant in the winter time. That means not planting them in November, right? We need to get them planted earlier than that to have good establishment in the fall. So with that, I can take any questions if there are any.
Sarah, what do you recommend for like small and urban farmers? I mean, I know that cover crops are important for big farmers, but you know, are these sort of things like cover crops still a good option for small farmers?
I think they're great. So whenever I talk to people about cover crops, the first conversation I have is, you know, what are the problems that you want to alleviate? The next conversation I go to is always the biological environment in our soils. Our microbes are important. I'll say it again, biological processes in the soil make up 90% of soil function. So I think it's especially important with urban farmers because they have a small space to work with. And you want to get as much function out of that small amount of soil that you can. And I think the baseline of that is building up our microbial environment, and that is giving them shelter and food, right? So shelter, having the residues on top of the soil to protect them from extreme temperature and moisture changes, giving them a variety of roots to feed on and interact with, because there are thousands, maybe millions of processes that happen between plant roots and microbes. And microbes also help us process our fertilizers that we put on top of our soil. So I think it's almost more important for these small urban farmers to use cover crops because it helps build up that biological environment.
Would you say the same is true for like the average person in their backyard? I mean, I know erosion's probably not as big of a deal for them, but like I just think of my parents that have a huge garden just for their family, but they have erosion all over their property. So is there something they can do? You know, how do you do no-till in a small garden? Or is that not a thing? Is it something you don't need to worry about?
So that's something that I actually have been experimenting myself, because we typically don't think of no-till and gardening, right? Because of weed pressure, things like that. But I think there is definitely a place for plants like cereal rye to suppress a lot of weeds in gardens, building up the soil organic matter, having those fibrous roots that will break up the surface compaction, where you normally need tillage to break up that surface compaction for vegetables. But I think we can do that with roots as well. And then your biological community are natural tillers as well. I mean, they will mix the soil quite a bit, actually. So I mean, that's something I'm experimenting with myself. I don't have a lot of experience with garden or urban farms, but I do think that there is a great opportunity for cover cropping in small gardens.
Sarah, I have a question. You spoke about monocultures. Our basic farming here and some of the gardening is done with 1 or 2 crops, corn, soybeans. Is there an advantage to putting another crop in that rotation, like a small grain?
Oh, I think there's huge opportunities. I mean, adding like a wheat to your rotation gives you an opportunity for, well, first of all, having a diverse cash crop rotation, and then it gives you an opportunity to put in a really heavy mix of cover crop after that wheat is harvested or that small grain is harvested. That leaves opportunity for animal feed if that's what you wish. If you don't have any animals, it gives a great opportunity to build up your soil health throughout that year, because you can use like a good summer annual mix and then switch to like a winter annual mix to get a good diverse cover crop in there. Is that what you were looking for, Mike?
Yep. Okay. Any other questions from anyone? Marissa, have any comments? I see you joined us.
I've been experimenting with cover crops in my urban space for the last 4 or 5 years. And one thing that I do notice is because I'm not tilling and I have a lot more organic matter, I have an issue with slugs in the early spring, which is always a battle, especially since I'm in such a small space and planting lots of different things. I had one year I had to rip out most of my greens and turnips because they were just devouring it. So that's always a challenge for me when it comes to using the cover crops and not tilling.
Maybe it's time to add a couple of chickens in the backyard. They love slugs.
I wish if Fort Wayne would get on board, I would.
All right.
Marissa,
well, how
have you
about,
worked? Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. That's fine. Go ahead.
I just wondered, Purdue Extension offers some help with slugs. They've been dealing with slugs in their urban garden. Have you worked with Purdue at all?
No, I haven't, but I'll check with Terry about that.
Yeah, they had problems with their slugs and something else too. And they learned about the companion cropping to get rid of slugs and stuff. So you might talk to them.
Okay, thanks. I'll check into that.
Yeah, I know. Even in the fields, I noticed the borders. If you have a good border around that make a habitat for them, they might go there, or they might increase your beneficial insects that will prey on them.
I think this new push for urban and small farming is so interesting because we're learning things from the small urban farms that we can use in our large scale operations too. I just think it's great. I want to thank all of you who are the guinea pigs for this and finding out the issues like slugs that we don't normally deal with on large scale operations. So it's very interesting.
Okay, well, how about if we move on to our next speaker, Chi-Hua Huang from the Soil Erosion Lab. You want to?
Okay, thank you, Mike. Well, welcome in this big snow day, and I will give you a little bit perspective from my experience working in pretty much my entire career in soil erosion. And I was a graduate student in Purdue. I came to Purdue I was here about 2 weeks in January 1978. The big blizzard came through. I think Purdue shut down for about a week. That's probably the longest shutdown they ever had in the history of what I know. At the blizzard of 1978, I just came to Purdue as a grad student. So then I went around a little bit. I came back to Erosion Lab in 1988 until now. So it's been a long career. So I'll share with you a little bit of my perspectives. And actually, Sarah gave a real good presentation about some of the infernal gullies and tillage practices to minimize it. But we do have some different findings about when we do conservation. And sometimes when you do one thing, they might trigger another thing. And this will be some part of my discussion. That's my research. It is interesting because you think you solve the problem once at one time, but whether the next generation can handle the same issue as what we face. So anyway, I make a lot of slides. And so if you have to go on to do something else, please leave. But anyway, I like to share with what I have. Let me do the share screen. And is it working now? can you see my screen?
Yep, it looks good.
Okay, so it's a cover screen and the soil erosion conservation research challenge and with the USDA Ag Research Service. It's on campus, National Soil Erosion Lab. This program starts in 1954. This program is evolved from the Dust Bowls. So I'll give you some perspectives in the history and what happened, and then what we face as our challenge. You see a second slide, right?
Yes, it's on. It
Okay,
looks like
all right, now I'm fine.
cereal.
I just want to make sure because sometimes what I see is not what you see. So soil loss is lost civilization. This has been known and it's happened in the world. And this picture is from National Geographic magazine, published in 2008 in the northwest part of Syria, and the whole area called the Dead Cities. And the scientists say that there's no soil to absorb the rainwater, spring won't flow. Then you're gonna lose your civilization. When you see these structures out there, you think about this, take a lot of work to build those big stone structures. Where are the people? I got a chance to visit the same area actually, and these are my own picture. And when you get closer to one of these big stone structures, look at that huge stone with all the animal carvings, and then you look around, and only thing I saw are some sheep are grazing around. They are getting a little bit grass in between the rocks, and that's all can support in that environment. So it's very important that we're not going to lose. We don't want our soil to be gone, and that we eventually have things happen again. And what happened in the U.S. And this has been known in the 30s and 40s. The Dust Bowls happening, and the dust blew all the way to Washington D.C. And then what happened is the father of soil conservation, Hugh Bennett. This is the person is actually I would say the first NRCS chief, or probably said it that way. In NRCS history archives, you'll find a lot of story about Hugh Bennett, and he's the one pre the Congress during the Dust Bowls, and then published an article, a book about soil erosion's national menace back in 1928. And if some of you are really interested in some of this classic literature, and I have these with me, this article with me. So it's his effort, and then he was able to establish some of the early erosion fields, erosion plots, and this is the kind of tie to our laboratory. So those in 1935, they established, you got 160,000 from the Congress to establish 10 experiment stations through Hugh Bennett's effort. And so after that, some of the data, these are some of the research information, universal soil loss equation, the data is collected from those field stations, eventually developed into the equation called universal soil loss equation, USLE. And then in the 60s and 70s, a lot of rainfall simulation experiments were conducted. And then from 80 till now, we start developing called the process-based erosion models. As Sarah mentioned, we look at sheet and rills and gully erosion as a separate processes. So our approach, research approach, from empirical observation to more process-based approach. And then our data collection is from natural runoff plots to rainfall simulation. And a little bit things we realize, we need to go back to more the natural plots. This is some of the things we start realizing we don't have a lot of real field data, field erosion data to work with. Okay, as a result of the development of those natural plot data, there's a sequence of erosion prediction technologies been developed from the 1965, the Ag Handbooks 282, 537, 703. This is just a progression of the universal soil loss equation technology. And so this is what the building you saw in the first picture in front of our building. We have two plaques. One is right outside. It's a historic landmark for the development of the universal soil loss equation. And then Hugh Bennett's work is also in a plaque right in front of the building, right at the entry of the building. Is provide a permanent agriculture in the prevention and control of erosion. And that's from Bennett's work. It is placed in our building. So that's the connection from our building, our research to the Dust Bowls. And then I'd like to point out a couple gentlemen here. The gentleman in the middle, it's Walt Wishmeyer. He's the developer of the universal soil loss equation. He came to Purdue campus in 1954 to start the program. And then Don Meyer, the tall gentleman on the left, he's the one I put very significant contribution is he started rainfall simulation technology. He identified nozzle, which used in all the ag research in the US. So with a rainmaking machine, we can have data collected in the lab and in the field, and with the control of the rainfall to do experiment. Waiting for natural rainfall, it is a hit and miss. So, and the gentleman on the right, Matt Runkins, he later became a director in the National Sedimentation Lab down in Mississippi. So here, I'd like to just show some of the rainfall simulations. In the early days, you can just get a watering can and put water on the soil and then create some erosion events. And then Don Meyer, the tall gentleman in the picture there, in 1954, he identified the nozzle and the use, and this nozzle is pretty much used in the US for erosion research. And I have the chance to visit many different countries about look at their erosion research. There are different rainmaking machines, but if you don't have a unified way to make rain, you have different energy and the results cannot be shared. So it's very lucky that in the US, we use, when we make rain, we use the same nozzle for research. So this is the first generation of the, they call it granulator at the time using the VJet nozzle. When I was a grad student, this system is still in operation. And then later we developed a trial system used in the field and also in the lab. Again, the nozzle and the spray are the VJet nozzles. And this is a laboratory, again, the same setup. And this is our laboratory, and we got many set up a rain simulator. So we can take the rain simulator indoors and outdoors and generate the same energy of the rain. Okay, going to a little bit more the contemporary issues right now. And then our agriculture has shifted from providing food and fiber needs to make sure we can maintain the environmental sustainability. So in the early days, when you worry about productivity, you worry about do you have enough resources. But when you solve your productivity issues and resource issues, environment become the big challenge. But what happened, what we see is we have evolved from the dust bowls to mud pits to pea soups. And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with, Sarah showed a picture of the Western Lake Erie issue, and that's what has been evolving. So these are the pictures showing what we have dealt with. We deal with the dust bowls, and we deal with field erosion and a lot of gullies formed. And then then this is everybody know about what happened in August 2014, right? The Toledo lost drinking water for 2.5 days, and then so this is what we're doing. But what we're doing is also worldwide. This is in two of the real biggest inland lakes. One, the Boyang Lake, and one's the Tai Lake. These are what's happening also in other part of the world. So very quick overview of our program, the National Soil Erosion Research Lab research. What we in the 50s and 70s, we mainly developed the universal soil loss equation, and then that's what our focus. Then in the 80s and the 2000, the next 20 years, we start developing the process-based erosion prediction model. But in 2000, it's kind of a transition for the lab. So we work on erosion for about 50 years. And then we start charged to look at watershed scale conservation effects assessment, the SEED project. And then at the meantime, we start more diverse and looking at other issues. For the first 50 years, our main focus is in sediment. Then we start looking at nutrients and pesticides. And then I highlight the phosphorus and peat removal technology. That's one of the things really big in our program right now, looking at how to deal with extra phosphorus issue. Okay, and then here you go. I'd like to spend a little bit of time to talk about my interactions and what I learned from my communication with NRCS and farmers. In the early 90s, down in Bradford County and in the Hartford City area, a DC mentioned to me that there are difficulties to promote conservation tillage because cattails were seen in the middle of the no-till field. So, it's a sign of some gutty growing gutty there, the wet spot. Conventional tilled field had no infernal gutties. So what happened is conventional tilled field, they go and till it over. And no-till field, they decide to leave the gutty where it is. And that was the initiation of my research looking into subsurface hydrology, how the subsurface water may affect the erosion processes. Again, fast forward to 2008, down in Kansas, near Hutchinson, Kansas, the no-till farmers complained that the field where terrace built by his grandparents cost more to farm, more time, more fuel, because the terrace built back in the 50s were probably a little bit more narrow. Then now the farming equipments are much wider. This no-till farmer was able to minimize his sheet and real erosion from his fields, but he did have a narrow gutty in his field. Okay, so he minimized his tillage practice, minimized the surface erosion, but he still have gutties in his field. So what the point is this, the conservation tillage practice may minimize surface erosion, but when we promote conservation tillage, we want the benefit is to promote infiltration, water not runoff, water infiltrated into the soil. So what happened is we might take a surface erosion problem, transfer into a subsurface erosion problem. And if the soil has an impeding layer, and water has to go somewhere, right? Water goes into the soil. And then if you have some impeding layer, water gonna come out, there'll be some wet spots. So the wet spot, when water it flows out of the soil, where I call seeps out of the soil. And then that could be the area where you might have haircuts and channels evolving in your field. So what happened is, I start looking at seeps, like the first picture here on the upper left. It's a bright sunny day. There are a lot of residues on the ground, but there's a little channel, little small gutties forming, right? Because the water's coming out of the field. Again, this is one area. There's a lot of residue, but this area, it got some small gullies forming, then you get to bigger scale. Okay, all these are caused by water coming out. This is a huge gully, but it's wet at the bottom, and there's some landslide, some hill slope issues and the bank issues. In research in Belgium, they quantify erosion. They call the summer gully versus winter gully. And this is in study, the infernal gully research. In the summer gully, they tend to be wide and shallow. And then in the winter gully, tend to be narrow and deep. Okay, and then the same things we have observed in the Kansas field. Okay, when that's the farmer's field on the right here, he has a lot of residues, but he decided to farm around this guy is pretty deep. You walk in there, this is about 3 feet deep right here at the deepest spot, right there. So he decided to leave this guy alone. This is what happened in the Bradford County condition, because the no-till farmer decided to farm around his gully, okay, small gully, and because that's a wet spot, and that's when the cattail grow. Then a conventional till farmer, he went ahead and tilled it over, then they'll resurface again. You can till it over, then they'll reappear again. So this is so this one may lose less soil because it's already more permanent. There's no sediment feeding to it. But this one, you have a lot of sediment feeding to it and then carrying away. So we are able to confirm those field observations in our laboratory. So these are the same soil, same slope. All we have to do is manipulate the way the water will drain into the soil. Okay, when I rain, the water will go into the soil. In this case, you see I use a tube on the lab to control the water table. Then this one, the tube is higher, water is seeping out. You see, these are totally different erosion processes occurring. So again, same soil, same slope, same amount of rain. One, you can start some, I call mini, this is a small laboratory box. So it's a 1.2 meter by 5 meter long box, but we can create what is happening in the field. So what happened is, so we know that seep cause a lot of issues, subsurface hydrology, and that's one of the research challenges we face. We do a lot of research we treat erosion as a surface process, okay? But subsurface process is very important. And then another thing is how we're gonna link sediments in the field and to the streams, okay? So this is another challenge because we have a lot of human factors like field boundaries and the drainage. So what happens, you look at all these pictures, you have a lot of field erosion happening on the hills. Okay, then when it comes to the bottom of the hill, they kind of deposits right there. Then there's a fence road, there's a fence right there where all the sediments got stopped, right? So whatever is, you got clear water coming out of the field, they start eroding on the other side of the field. Okay, and again, so what happens, linking sediments from fields to streams is a very challenge. So I got 2 more slides. So what happened is I'd like to share with you what kind of challenges we face in the field scale erosion assessment. Okay, and we need to have a better accounting for sediment deposition, because not erode the sediment from the hill slope make it to the waterways, and it's a very small fraction make it to the waterways. Okay, then how are we going to link between surface hydrology and the subsurface hydrology in both sediment and the chemical transport process? A lot of chemical are actually moved also through the tidewaters, not just the surface runoff. So, and then how are we going to develop technology to assess the infernal gully? because you see the process is different. And in early springs, a lot of gully will develop in early springs. We call them the winter gullies, okay? But then in the hot summer days, you got a very heavy storm. If soil is not protected, you will have those summer gullies. So then how are we gonna account for the field boundaries, the fence rows, or the drainage features, which can change the way sediment and water moves on your landscape? Another thing is our farming technology is changing. And as I mentioned, the farmer is asking whether NRCS will cost share to unterrace his field, okay? Because again, we have a smaller equipment, now with a bigger equipment. So what we do right now may not be doing might have environmental issues later. We face these, the nutrients and pesticides. We develop technologies for ag production, but now we're facing environmental issues. Okay, again, it's very important. No one size fits all solution or combination of BMPs for individual situations. Then what happened in the watershed scale, because I mentioned about 2003, we were charged to make erosion assessment at the watershed scale. So some of the challenge what we face is people put in BMP and then change it with time, try a couple years and go different technologies. Okay, well, how can we collect the data to make watershed scale assessment? Most of our conservation practice will develop for field scale conservation. But if we're gonna address watershed scale response, then that's very challenging. Okay, watershed and Great Lake, and understand how we start the seed project in 2003, right? We say we gotta do some big watershed project. Greg say, well, we need to look at from the field up. And so, baseline versus change, and how we gonna be able to quantify the mixing of surface and subsurface water. Okay, and then we need to, how we identify pollutant source, the pathway, what happened in the field versus what happened in stream, right? And the in-stream process is also very important. And then I think Sarah mentioned a little bit of climate change makes very challenging too. We're dealing with a lot of transient responses right now. Okay, so in conclusion, in terms of the erosion aspects, we have a surface hydrology control the process, but then we also have the subsurface hydrology control the process. And then the very important point is water moves the sediment or soil mass under the force of gravity. So when you deal with landslides and debris flows and the bank failures and tunnel erosion, winter gullies, those are mainly driven by subsurface hydrology process. We spend a lot of efforts in looking at the surface process, keeping more residues on the ground and minimize the tillage. Those are all good ways to minimize surface erosion, but we also need to make sure we can manage the subsurface water properly. So any questions you have, and here's my name and my email. You can reach me through the government email or my Purdue email. Any questions? Oh, by the way, if you don't really understand what I talk about in the last 25 minutes, I'm not speaking English. I'm using Wuzhou Chinese. So just don't get frustrated because your Chinese is not as good as mine. So it's a Wuzhou Chinese language I use.
Yeah, Chihuahua, we are starting to use deeper rooting plants, and the soil health increase. We're getting the granitic matter going better. Does that affect the subsurface soil or water? What does soil health mean to you or to erosion? Well,
to me, it's these. Well, it's okay. There's another. If you have a deeper rooting plants, one of the things what we really is whether our farming system changed the way water moves, right? The deeper rooting plant might reduce the water seep out at some of the wet spots because they'll keep taking water from deeper areas. So that's good. And then also the way I look at it, if you got deeper rooting plants, they might reduce the tunnel erosion. Some area they have tunnel erosion. That what happens is the surface water flow in the subsurface on top of impeding layer eventually cause a tunnel underneath. And the people in Mississippi, they study tunnel erosion. It could be a texture differences. It might have some sandy structure down in the subsurface where water flow faster. And eventually, some people will attribute some of the infernal gully in the field actually from tunnel subsurface, then they collapse, start forming the surface channel, looks like. And there's some hypothesis say, well, tunnel erosion, well, the collapse, you got a tunnel under in the subsurface. So if you have a deep rooting plants, that might minimize the subsurface process. Any other questions from the audience?
Hey, Chihuahua, this
And
is
then let me
Greg.
go ahead and stop my share. Okay.
Yeah, Chihuahua, hey, this is Greg. Good seeing you.
Hey, yeah.
Hey, I'm deviating a little bit from erosion. A couple of the other things you guys have been looking at up at Waterloo and other places. What's the latest on your work with trying to use iron slag for nutrient removal?
Wow, that's big thing. And I suggest Andrea, maybe we're gonna bring Chad Penn over for a session just on peat removal structure. And it's a really big program. We hired Chad Penn about 4 years ago. He's about the only scientist in the US working on ways to remove phosphorus once it gets into the drainage water.
Okay.
And he's been putting up a lot of structures around a very, very active program. So that's one of the things I suggest and bring him on and he to talk about how to use different ways to remediate the phosphorus in drainage water.
Slip back then a little bit, the erosion. What are you guys seeing, if anything, in your study with shallow vertical tillage in the fall as guys are trying to use that process to put their cover crops out? Are you seeing that as a detriment, or maybe your studies don't really lend towards that? But we see a lot of guys trying to use vertical tillage tools and add an air system on it to deliver their cover crops to the fall.
I can't comment. I'm the person living in the ivory tower. you probably, if you talk to people at the Cap County, they say I haven't seen Chihuahua for a long time. Okay, so my career is all in research. My interest is looking at a field and understand what happens, and to try to point out these are what's really challenging and to work on. So I can't really address the vertical tillage. The way I really look at it is if you got, that's what I'm saying, you know, in no-till, we have promote the infiltration, minimize the surface erosion. But no-till farmers decide to leave the gully alone, right? They know they're not gonna, that's a wet spot and they're not gonna deal with that spot. So again, it's there. The infernal gully caused by subsurface water will be there. And so the smart farmer farm around it, and that's what the DC, I can't remember his name. I feel embarrassed. It's a DC at Breckford County about in the early 90s. I somehow have to go back to my note. He mentioned how to get farmers to adopt no-till. They got cattails. we went ahead and till our field, we have no cattails in our field.
Yeah.
That was, yeah, I can't remember his name, but I'm embarrassed. So that's how I start looking at subsurface water. How would subsurface water, I think we're working on that area where some clay soil. So there's some impeding there to work with.
Do you have any comments on drainage tile or any thoughts?
Okay, yes, drainage will definitely minimize. We once you, okay, drainage would, if you can move the water into the soil, okay, that will, and then take it from some controlled place, and that will minimize it. And I have another story. This is happened just across the state line in Ohio. And then Dr. Non Fauci, he's a drainage researcher for 45 years at Columbus, Ohio. He mentioned to me at one time that a farmer asked him about a farmer in Ohio, and I think it's in the northwest part of Ohio, and putting some controlled drainage structures. Okay, so what happens in the winter? The farmer kept the water table kind of a little bit higher. Okay, but then he said this farmer observed that his overwinter garbage disappeared. So he couldn't understand what happened when he in a controlled drainage structure, and then the linkage. And I know what happens. What happened is this: when water flows into the soil, okay, I call them drainage, water flow into the soil. It's the flux makes a difference. Okay, how fast the water flow into the soil. You just think about it's like suction, right? So when you put a control structure there, keep the water table, say 18 inches in the winter from the surface, versus no control structure where they'll naturally drain from from whatever the depth of the tile. Okay, so what happened is that raise the water table would increase the flux. Water will actually flow down faster. Then you have a water on the surface, and then the tile is 3-4 feet down. Okay, so you have the gradient, but you don't have the flux. So that explains the reason is when you raise the water table closer to the surface, water flows down faster. Then you don't raise it, you keep it all the way to the bottom. So what happened is, that's exactly what happened. We can reproduce this in the laboratory. Means if we control the flux of water into the soil, the water flows faster, the soil is stronger. And this is exactly what happened when you were in the beach. When the wave comes in, it wets the sand, right? And then when the wave recedes, it's very firm, right? The sand is very firm. But if you put your feet into the water, you can wiggle your toes, and then all the sand will move up, right? So you try to think about use your feet, your toe to wiggle the sand when the wave first comes. It much is harder. So again, this is the soil matrix suction, and the flux coming down will actually make the soil stronger. It will hold the soil together, just like the suction in the soil to hold the soil together. We have reproduced those phenomena in the laboratory, so we can explain what happened in the field.
So, there's always contact then before we do something else might happen. Without that phosphorus or the nutrients flowing down, affected by drainage tiles or without the drainage water management structure?
Well, that's a little bit outside my area. Yeah, a little bit outside my area
Okay.
of knowledge to address the. That's what I'm saying. I suggest Andrea at one time, maybe later you'll have a phosphorus specific talk. You know, I can't I don't have in the intimate knowledge about phosphorus. I know sediments in all my career, and so I know a lot more about sediments than phosphorus. We are more,
Yeah.
other people can speak in more authority than me.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Any questions from the audience? I think the point what I'm trying to bring up is it's very important. We're solving we look at the history of agricultural production when we use the science and technology to produce crops. You know, now we start facing, just like another story out in the Southwest, right? On the big aquifer there underneath Western Texas and Oklahoma and New Mexico. They are running out of groundwater, right? Irrigation, we use irrigation we pump groundwater to irrigate our crops. Now we lose our groundwater. You know, groundwater is so low, and again, this is another farmers visit in New Mexico, and we visit some. They grow a lot of peppers and some of these horticultural crops out there using by pumping water from the ground. And then they say, well, they like to expand when the next door farmer decide to quit farming and try to sell the land. This farmer, he wish he can expand, but the state decide to purchase the farm and try to conserve the water resources, paying some good price for it. So this is happening. It's buying up land, farmlands to reduce the pumping of the groundwater. So these farmers say, I wish I could pay the same prices, stay paying for my neighbor's land, but I can't. So that's what is happening. And this is happening in New Mexico. And when I visit a farmer, they say, well, that's what it is. You know about the aquifer. I can say it right. It starts with A. Somewhere down in the Western Texas, New Mexico, and that's a big groundwater drawdown issues. And how, again, we also seen it in other part of the world, and the irrigated agriculture produce a lot of salinity issues, right? When you need irrigation, means you're dry, and then when you put fertilizer on it, sometimes extra fertilizer stays in the soil profile, becomes a salinity issue. And this big issue out in the Western US too is to build up the nutrients and changing soil salinities and all these. You know, you don't have enough water. And then that, again, I'm just saying, agriculture technology brings us ways to produce more food, but at some time, it come back to bite us in our environment. And that's what we're doing. And I always tell people, the problem we're solving are created in the last 30 to 50 years. That's what I'm doing, right? Phosphorus problem is not created from this year's farming. It's being created from 30, 50 years of farming. Pesticides, the same issue. We deal with the pesticide issue in 2003, right? Great Lake understand that, but it's not created what we deal with. Before I leave, I'd like to talk to this group about, let me ask, they're farmers here, right? Mike, I heard that you're a farmer, right?
Yes, I am. And
other farmers in the audience, what you grow?
Corn, soybeans, and I put a third of oats in, so I'm on a 3-year rotation right now that I raise oats for seed.
So you only grow those? Did you grow
a little bit of hay, either alfalfa or grass.
Right. So you grow those for your family, for your living, right?
For the living.
right?
And yeah,
You grow those every year. So you account for how much you spend and how much you get back year after year, right? Every year you plan what you want to do. You hope you're doing okay,
sure.
right?
Yep, right.
Do you
Yeah.
remember? I think you missed something. I like to say you're growing soil too, aren't you?
Well, yeah, I should say that. I believe I am.
That this
I'm
is very
definitely
important.
I'm definitely raising organic matter and raising the surface darkness, the dark colors.
That's very important for conservationists to talk to the farmer about their growing soil. They grow crops for their annual issue, but you grow soil is permanent wells you're building, right? You don't build your annual bank account. You're building a permanent wells for yourself, for your family, for the rest of the society.
Right.
So I really give my kudos to the conservation farmers. They are growing soil, not just a crop. This is the conversation I had at Kansas City at the living room. The farmer, he's growing wheat and the corn and the rotating different times. But I say, you're growing soil. I say, oh, wow. I say, that's very important. Good job you guys are doing.
Yeah, I put that in most of my talks. I haven't added land to my soil, but I'm farming better. The eroded knobs, from the years of tillage, producing now where before they have a half of it, now they're equal to the rest. So the clay knobs. So, and I actually had a soil scientist once at a soil pit. It was an agronomy day for the technical people. And I had the soil map lay in there. It was supposed to be a yellow blonde. And he says, now look at this. It is darker colored to red, about the top 10, 12 inches. And he says that if he had to reclassify that, he'd have to change the soil classification because of the darkness.
Okay. Well, any other questions you have for me, or I can give the talk again in Chinese. So. Well, again, any one of you are on campus and just
Andrea, Greg,
we'll be happy to show you what we're doing. And actually, we have some of the prototype, some of the scale model peat removal structure in the building going on. And then actually, Chet Penn got the funding to build a demo peat removal. Our agency provided funding for him to build a mobile unit to go around for field days so you'll be a trader, can be hauled around, and then there'll be a peat removal structure in there to show how it works. So hopefully it's funded last year, but we got shut down. But hopefully we'll get that going to be part of your field days and get back to us about, we try to put some push to get that built. He's funded to build a mobile demo.
When do you think you'll have that prepared,
Let me ask him.
Okay.
Well, we need to prepare that before Stan retires.
What's that?
Stan, Stan Livingston?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's retiring?
Well, in the end of the year.
Really? Yeah.
We got 10 months to harass him. Or 11 months.
T-Rob, before you go, I want to publicly thank you for your lab continuing to support our efforts up here in the water quality monitoring. Ron has done a phenomenal job for us. We really appreciate you guys hanging in there like that. So the interest in the data you guys help provide is always looked forward to getting. So appreciate your help.
But great, I'd really like to mention that, 2003, when we start the Sweepy project, soil, wherever. We call it Sweepy. I can't remember what it's spelled now. So you are the one, we were out there and say, watershed. You're the one tell us we need to do field scale. That's what, again, in history, our lab has never had any field monitoring. We never maintained any plots until we were told to deal with the Source Water Protection Initiative. Now I remember.
Yep.
And then you are the one say you can just go on the layout watershed things. You need to go from field up.
Yep.
We start realizing how important that is. I appreciate your insight to help us form our field monitoring program.
We spent a lot of days out looking for a site, didn't we?
Sure, I really appreciate that. You are the one get us started.
Well, again, thanks, Chihuahua, for all your help.
Okay.
Joelle or Andrea, do you have anything else for Sarah or Chihuahua?
No, I think we're good. I really appreciate Sarah and Chiwa participating today and sharing their knowledge with us. It was really great.
Chihuahua, you
Good,
kept me
yes.
off the end of a snow shovel too. So
Yeah. Okay. Go out to snow. Get the driveway clear.
thank you.
All
Be
right.
safe. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.